Have you ever spent so long scrolling through Netflix that you just give up and go to bed? Or maybe you've stood in a grocery store aisle completely paralyzed by a wall of 50 different kinds of cereal. Well, that feeling, it has a name. And today, we're going to dive deep into the fascinating and totally counterintuitive science behind the paradox of choice. So let's start with this idea right here, because it really sets the stage perfectly. We're always taught that freedom means more options, more choice. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the very thing we believe is making us free is actually making us less happy? To get a sense of just how big this problem is, just look at this number, 35,000. That is the estimated number of decisions the average person makes every single day. From what to wear, to what to say, to what to click on next, our brains are constantly working.
And that brings us right here, to the modern world. The thing is, we're living in an era with an absolute explosion of choices, more options for everything than at any other point in human history. And frankly, our brains just weren't built to handle it.
A perfect, and I mean perfect example of this is something I'm pretty sure we've all experienced: Netflix paralysis. You've got thousands of movies and shows right at your fingertips. And what happens? We spend, on average, almost 20 minutes just scrolling. A lot of the time, we just give up. More choice didn't lead to a better decision, it just led to no decision at all.
So how do we know this is a real, measurable thing? Well, it really all comes back to this brilliant and almost ridiculously simple experiment that completely flipped our understanding of choice on its head. Okay, so a couple of psychologists, Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper, set up 2 tasting booths for jam in a grocery store. It was a really simple setup. On one day, they put out a huge display with 24 different kinds of fancy jam. On another day, they offered just 6. Simple, right? But the results were anything but. Now this is where it gets really interesting. The big, impressive display with 24 jams, it definitely attracted more people. About 60% of shoppers stopped to take a look. But, and this is the important part, look at who actually bought a jar. Only 3%. Now compare that to the small display. Fewer people stopped, sure, but of the ones who did, a whopping 30% of them actually bought a jar of jam. That is 10 times more sales, simply by offering fewer options. It's wild. So the big question is why? What is actually happening inside our brains that makes us freeze up when we're faced with too many choices? Well, it turns out there are 3 main psychological culprits we need to talk about.
First up is something called analysis paralysis. The best way to think about this is like a computer that has way too many programs open at once. Each potential choice is like another program running. Eventually, your brain's processing power just gets totally maxed out, and to protect itself, it just shuts down. It leads to you doing nothing at all.
And you can see this analysis paralysis everywhere in modern life. It's that choice fatigue you get from swiping through an endless sea of profiles on dating apps. It's why studies show we're actually less satisfied at restaurants with huge, sprawling menus. And it's even connected to the anxiety college students feel when faced with hundreds of potential majors.
Okay, the second culprit is decision fatigue. Here's the thing, your ability to make good, rational decisions isn't infinite. It's a finite resource, a lot like a muscle. And every single decision you make all day long, from tiny to huge, wears that muscle out.
And when that mental battery starts to drain, the consequences are very, very real. The quality of your decisions can actually drop by half. You become way more likely to make impulsive purchases you regret later, and you start just picking the default option, not because it's the best, but just to avoid the effort of making another choice. You know, some of the world's most effective people are incredibly aware of this. President Obama famously limited his wardrobe to just gray or blue suits. This wasn't a fashion statement, it was a high-performance strategy. He was proactively getting rid of trivial choices to save his finite mental energy for the decisions that actually mattered. All right, and that brings us to the final psychological trap, post-decision regret. It's a sneaky one. See, the more options you have to choose from, the easier it is to imagine that there was a slightly better, perfect choice that you missed. And this creates this nagging what-if feeling that can ruin your happiness, even if you made a really good decision. And the research on this is crystal clear. Let's say you buy a new phone, and you love it. But if you know there were 50 other models you could have picked, you're haunted by the ghosts of those other choices. This constant second-guessing just chips away at your satisfaction.
So this all leads to a really crucial question. A psychologist named Barry Schwartz argues that most of us fall into one of 2 main categories when it comes to making decisions. As we go through them, I want you to ask yourself, honestly, which one sounds more like you?
Okay, so on one side, you've got the maximizers. Their goal is always to find the absolute #1 best possible option. This means they do exhaustive research, they spend a ton of time, and here's the twist, they end up with higher regret. Then you've got the satisficers. Their goal is just good enough. They figure out their basic criteria, they pick the first thing that meets those criteria, and they move on. The result? Faster decisions and way more satisfaction. And right here, this is the core paradox of it all. The maximizer, the person who puts in all the extra work and stress to find the perfect choice, consistently ends up less happy and more stressed than the satisficer, who is totally content with just good enough. It's completely backwards from what you'd expect.
So the problem is pretty clear, but the really good news is that the solution is just as clear. So let's talk about a practical toolkit you can use to take back control from choice overload and reclaim some of that precious mental energy.
Okay, the most powerful strategy you can use is to just learn to think like a satisficer. So step 1, before you even start looking at options, decide what your good enough standards are. What do you actually need? Step 2, the moment you find something that checks those boxes, stop looking. Just commit. And step 3, and this is crucial, consciously embrace that choice. Let go of the hunt for a mythical, perfect option.
You can also start hacking your environment to make things easier on your brain. Think of it as designing your world to have fewer choices. If you're shopping online, just decide you'll only look at 3 to 5 options. Use every filter available to slash the number of things you have to look at. And for those daily, routine decisions like lunch, just create a default go-to choice to eliminate the decision entirely.
And this isn't just a personal well-being thing. This is a powerful business reality. Remember that jam study? Well, companies are applying that same logic on a massive scale. Businesses that have strategically reduced the number of products they offer have seen their sales increase by as much as 40%. They are proving, with real money, that less truly is more.
And this all brings us to the ultimate takeaway, the big idea. We've been sold this version of freedom that says it's all about having infinite choice. But maybe true freedom, true mental liberation, is actually having the self-awareness and the wisdom to choose our own limits.
So, I'm going to leave you with a challenge. Don't just think about this. Try it. For just 1 week, make a conscious effort to adopt the satisficer mindset. Make quick, good enough decisions and refuse to second-guess them. Just notice how much time and mental energy you free up for the people and the projects that actually truly matter.